So good morning, everybody. It's time for us to start these discussions. So I think it's about 10:30. It's about the time to start. So welcome to distinguished participants. Welcome to the seminar series for IMO Maritime Week. This seminar is held by Embassy of Indonesia in London and also the One Ocean Hub. Is a part of our participations for World Maritime Day of IMO. And before we start our seminars, I just want to give you some information that you can introduce yourself through chat functions. And also, if you have a question to be raised, you can also use question and answer chat. And today's seminars, we have a theme as Sustainable Shipping for Sustainable Planet. We already have three presenters, and for the first presenters, we will invite Professor Bhavani. Professor Bhavani, she is a researcher for a Scottish Association for Marine Science, and she will be deliver the information according to the distribution and abundance of microplastics in the world oceans. Today we have almost maybe 1 hour and more to all complete all the discussions. So every speakers we have allocate 10 minutes or something before we proceed to the question and answer. So Ms. Bhavani, Professor Bhavani, the time is yours.
Thank you very much indeed for introducing me, and thank you for inviting me to talk today. I will share my screen, and I'm hoping that you will be able to see my slideshow when it starts. Can somebody just nod and tell me that you can see it?
Yep. It's
brilliant. Thank you very much. Okay, so I'm going to talk today about plastics, microplastics, particularly in the world's oceans. I'm actually based up here. If you look on this map, I'm based up in Oban on the west coast of Scotland. It's a beautiful sunny day today, as it shows as well in this picture. People think west coast of Scotland is very gloomy, but actually it's a beautiful place to live. And it looks as though it's quite a pristine area. So I'd like to start by saying, what are microplastics? Some of you will know, perhaps others won't. So microplastics are small pieces of plastic that range from 5 millimeters to 1 micron in diameter. And the term was first introduced to the literature by Richard Thompson back in 2004. And if you look at the pictures here, you can see different shapes and sizes of microplastics. So we have fibers, we have small pellets that come from personal care products, and also from cleaning products, other fragments, as well as these small plastic pellets, virgin pellets, that are nurdles. And you can see they're quite small. I say they're small, they're probably at the larger end, they're probably about 5 millimeters in diameter. So we'll start with the issue of pellets or nurdles. So they're made from oil, and the oil is taken to a factory and nurdles are created. They're transported in the backs of lorries to perhaps other factories where items such as plastic bottles, some of the clothing we wear, computers, mobile phones, etc., everything that needs plastics is made. But nurdles are easily spilt and are lost, both in transit and in the factories, and it's very difficult to clean them up. But they're also lost in transit when we take them onto ships and when they're put into containers. And these ships take them around the world so that other countries can make items made from plastic. As I said, they are easily lost. And this image here shows hundreds of millions of plastic pellets that have been washed up on the shoreline of Hong Kong's Lamma Island. And this was back in 2012. And what happened, a ship was sailing, a typhoon went through the area and it knocked containers over the side of the ship. The containers split open and all these plastic pellets arrived on the beach. and volunteers were asked to go and clean up the beaches, and they will have removed as many of these pellets as possible, but not all of them, because they're so small it's difficult to pick up all the individual tiny pellets. Just briefly moving on to large plastics, and you'll see why in a minute. Back in 1992 in the Pacific, just here again, containers were knocked over the side of a ship, and the containers split open, and these quite cute yellow bath toys, amongst others, were lost at sea. We're talking almost 30,000 of them were lost. It was a great opportunity for oceanographers to be able to track currents and see where they go around the world. And in 2007, they ended up reaching the northwest coast of France and the southeast coast of England. So this is great. You can track larger particles, such as these bath toys, but these bath toys will break down from photooxidation, from the sunlight, from wind and wave action, and they'll break down into smaller and smaller particles, which are much more difficult to track around the world. And some of them will sink out of the water column and into the sediment. It's not just bath toys. You start thinking about the clothes you wear. So here in the UK, we wear fleeces to keep warm, but they're made from plastic, and other items of clothing will also have plastic within them. You put them in a washing machine to clean, and a full washing machine load can release over 700,000 fibers per wash. Those particles from your washing machine, the wastewater, will enter into a wastewater treatment plant, and there are various meshes which will remove the fragments, especially the large fragments such as tree branches, as well as the smaller plastics. And that treated water, or effluent as it's called, is then released into rivers or directly out into the marine environment, but it has generally been well treated. However, if you think of it like this, a wastewater treatment plant may take in 8,000 million particles per day. And even after treatment, it may release almost 600 million particles per day. That's a huge number. I had a look at an area off the southeast coast of the USA, Charleston Harbor, and this has, I think, 3 wastewater treatment plants releasing treated water into the harbor. And this alone emits up to 1 billion microplastics each day from treated effluent. Now, if you start multiplying that up for around the globe, and not everywhere has such high quality or such good wastewater treatment plants, you begin to realize the number of particles that may be entering our marine environment on a daily basis. So I wanted to show you some of the places where I've been finding microplastics. I've been looking up in the Arctic. This is the Barents Sea, and we looked at a transect going from about 72 degrees north to 83 degrees north. We looked at water samples, and we found that just below the surface of the water, 5 meters, that the main types of microplastics were actually fibers with some fragments, pellets and film, and the colors were mainly translucent and black. However, one of our stations was at 3,000 meters, and this was at the furthest end of the transect, 83 degrees north. We find that there were actually more fragments being found compared to the surface, but the color, or it was colorless, it was translucent. So that's quite a lot of fibers that we're also finding at this depth. Coming further south into the Northeast Atlantic to a place called the Rockall Trough, where I've done a lot of deep sea work, we were looking at the quantity and the types of plastics being eaten, ingested by different organisms, such as this gastropod, etc. And we found that the sea star here had the greatest number of microplastics within the body, whilst the brittle star just below it here, on my screen here, actually had the greatest number of polymer types. We were fortunate that we were able to do a multi-decadal analysis, and we were looking back to the mid-1970s through to 2015. And when we started the project, I thought that we would begin to see an increase in the number of particles, microplastics, within our animals. but that's not true. We're finding that it's actually fairly constant, slightly higher in 2013, but it's fairly constant from the mid-1970s through to 2015 when the survey ended. This was quite a surprise, and it shows that microplastics are being found at 2,000 meters down in the deep sea, way back in the mid-1970s. The polymers, the fibers were mainly acrylic and polyester. However, when we looked at the fragments, they were alkyd resin as well as acrylic and polyester. We also looked at deep sea water and collected it just above the surface of the sediment. There we were finding over 70 fibers per meter cubed, and they were mainly polyester in type. We also looked at the sediment and took cores down to 10 centimeters and below, and we were finding that plastic was found at a depth of 10 centimeters. Now that may not sound very much, but if you put it into terms of years, that's equivalent to 150 years. And microplastics haven't, or plastic hasn't been around that long, and it shows that animals are moving this plastic down to depth. Moving into the Indian Ocean, looking at samples of benthic litter, we're finding discarded fishing nets, plastic objects possibly from plumbing are being discarded. And these are on seamounts just off the southeast coast of South Africa here. We were looking at to see what types of litter there were, and surprisingly, unsurprisingly, off the southeast coast of Africa, it was mainly fishing nets on these seamounts. As we come up into the Atlantic off the west coast of Africa, there's more of a split between fishing gear and glass and other items. These grey lines here show where the commercial shipping activity is taking place. So there is some impact from that. We also looked at the microplastics from these sediments, particularly from the seamounts. And you'll see in this blue box here, we were finding 2-3 pieces of microplastic fibers in only 50 milliliters of sediment, and they were mainly polyester and other synthetic fibers. We're going deeper again. We think of perhaps deep sea trenches as being pristine environments, and we looked at these amazing animals, crustaceans known as amphipods, living in these very deep trenches. And again, we were finding microparticles of man-made synthetic or semi-synthetic fibers in the hindgut, so in the stomachs, really, back ends of the stomachs of these amphipods. And if we look at this station here, this is the Marianas Trench. So we're looking at almost 11,000 meters down, and the animals there, we were finding these microplastics. The plastics fibers, mainly fibers, were mainly blue in color. So where are microplastics found? These purple circles indicate where we're finding them, and the size of the circle indicates how many are being found. And this is all on the RV Litterbase database, where they collect information from all the papers published. What I would hasten to add is where you don't see a circle doesn't mean that there isn't plastic there. It just means we haven't got necessarily samples from there yet, and that will come. There are very few studies specifically on plastics, microplastics out in the open ocean. It's always tagged on to another study. So just some final take-home facts for you. There are thought to be more than 5 trillion pieces of floating plastics in the ocean. That's floating, that's not within the water column necessarily, and in the seafloor or in the animals themselves. Microplastics are being found in areas that were really thought to be pristine, such as the deep sea and the Arctic. And as a human race, we need to do more to try and reduce our dependence on plastic and single-use plastic. I just want to say thank you very much for listening, and I hope you got some good information from it. Thank you.
Thank you, Professor Bhavani. Thank you. I take note that plastic is everywhere, and this is a big issue to tackle with. Thank you for the information. Forgive me, because I'm jumping in the materials for the substances. I forgot to introduce myself. My name is Lollan Panjaitan. I belong to the Indonesian embassy as a transportation attaché. And also, just to remind you, who distinguished participants who just joined these discussions, you can raise your questions through the questions and answer chattings. So far, we see that so many of you coming from the operator, researcher, regulator, and also from the authority. So maybe you have something to ask. You can raise your questions through the question and answer functions. And we proceed to the next speakers. I would like to invite Mr. Basilio Araujo. I think Mr. Basilio is already here. Yep. He is the Assistant Deputy for Maritime Security and Resilience from Coordinating Ministry for Maritime Affairs and Investments. I think he will deliver information about cooperative mechanisms related to the enhanced marine pollutions. Mr. Basilio, you have the floors.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Lollan, and also Ambassador Adam Tugio, who is also still here. Ambassador, I read your name still DCM, so I'm supposed to be ambassador. But anyway, I thank the organizer of this meeting who invited me to be speaking in this forum. And as Mr. Lollan already mentioned, I will cover mostly on the cooperative mechanisms in the Malacca Straits or some other types of cooperations Indonesia has as a littoral states and the users partnership to improve navigation, safety, and enhance maritime pollution prevention in the Straits of Malacca and Singapore. Well, I think this slide is not new to all of us, but for some who has never been seen any map of Indonesia, or at least the red there shows how the issue that I'm talking about will be covering. So we have a very important strait called the Strait of Malacca, and it connects Pacific Indian and Pacific and Indian Oceans. And it is about 432 nautical miles long. Most parts are between 27 nautical miles and 162 nautical miles wide. At its narrowest point in the Phillip Channel of the Singapore Strait, the Malacca Strait is only 1.5 nautical mile, very narrow. And if you have read so many incidents there, and collisions there. So this at least shows you an indication it is too narrow. So it's why many collisions happen in that place. This narrow space creates a natural bottleneck, as well as a potential for collisions, groundings, and also from collisions, of course, it will result in oil pollutions. And it is in this strait we have more than 50,000, but actually the figure goes up to 90,000 per year ships that play the waterway every year, carrying about 40% of the world's trade and about 3.3 million barrels per day of Middle East crude pass through the straits and to Japan. Nearly 80% of China's crude oil imports passing through it from the Middle East and Africa. And at least 15 million of oil flow through the Malacca Strait from the Middle East, Gulf, and the west of Africa. So at least by these figures, we can see how important Malacca Strait is one of the busiest choke points in the world. Well, of course, being sharing the straits with other countries, and by having many ships passing through these strait, well, one of the impact is the oil that originates from ships and tankers that uses this strait. So, as I mentioned, it is a very busy strait, 36% of world shipping, all with a value of 390 billion US dollars, and 7% and counting of world shipping, or with a value of 5 billion US dollars. And overall, Malacca and Sunda and Lombok Strait manage 50%, 58% of world shipping, worth about 435 billion. So the figure is very high from what we can see here. But as I said, well, incidents always happen for many times in this strait. And this in this slide, there is an example of Ali Armuk, and it is a MV Sinar Kapuas. This incident happened in 2015. The estimations of 4,500 metric tons of Madura crude oil spilled and impacted to the nearest islands in Malacca Strait. Well, the impact that Indonesia faces from this oil spill is that it pollutes our beaches, and and some of other countries are putting some bad adverts that don't go to Indonesia anymore because the beach are all polluted by oils. Well, actually, Indonesia as islands, archipelagic states with more than 70,000 islands, while Malacca Strait or the islands closest to the Malacca Strait is only some or a few of 17,000 islands. And by 2019, Indonesia targets to attract around 20 millions of foreign tourists, in which around 4 millions should come from the marine tourism sector. But with the adverts that we have in some news, of course, also impacts for some visitors who want to come to Indonesia. Well, this is some, I will show you some pictures what happened in the Bintan Island, what Indonesia should pay as a contribution to the straits. Well, actually, we don't get the payment, but we have to, spend money to clean up the beach from the oil that was spilled by some other ship that we don't know. We don't know whether this practice is, actually international merchant shipping should know that they should not do this, but we don't know. Why during the months of September up to March every year, the islands of Bintan in the Batam area always face these pollutions, while in the other months we don't hear any similar information from Singapore. So these pose also questions: why only during the month of September this pollution happens in our beaches and not other months when the streams flows to the Singaporean waters? And this you see in a very touristic destination island called Bintan area. This is the beach that prompts you when you come to Bintan Island during the months of September up to March. And you can see even in these nice stones that you cannot find in any other places, but with this color, of course, nobody will want to go there. And most affected areas, it is in the Batam area or areas close to Malacca Strait, but also even the spills move to the Java Island, and even some will pass through and of course move to other islands. Well, we have some mechanisms to track And we also have some cooperations with the international organizations such as Interpol through some cooperations in 2019 and 2018. We could find up to 30 merchant shipping who does these activities. And we nationally, we are preparing to bring these cases to international court and also other forums that are relevant, including also through the IMO forums every time when I go there. Well, besides ships, of course, Indonesia as a big aquatic state, we also have examples of oil spills that originate from fixed platforms. And this case already happened in 2009, but up to now, we cannot solve this case because this incident happened in Australian waters, but the oil then passed through Indonesian territorial waters and to Indonesian islands. And we have some complications on how to bring this case to the court and which court we should choose. And some of our communities have to bring this case to Australian court, and it has been going on for 3 years. And even when Mr. Adam was in Australia at that time, and even today, we still this case has not been solved yet. Well, we have some mechanisms of how to respond to oil spills when it happens in the ASEAN level. We have a memorandum of understanding on ASEAN cooperation mechanisms for joint oil spill preparedness and oil response. And we also have similar cooperations in the Malacca Straits, and also similar cooperations with Indonesia, Malaysia, and Philippines, back to like starting 1970s or 1980s. So these cooperations is already in place, and we even have all the technical meetings and technical cooperations every year. Well, we also have some, contributions as a port state for maritime security. For example, we established Naval Command Center for combating armed robberies in the adjacent closed areas. So these centers can also provide intelligence information and other efforts that can be supported from our side. We also have like bilateral or trilateral cooperations in place: Indonesia, Malaysia coordinated patrols. We have Indonesia, Singapore coordinated patrols. We have Indonesia, Malaysia, Singapore coordinated patrols. And this shows the cooperative mechanism that we have in place in the Malacca Straits and then also Sulu, Sulawesi Seas. This slide just shows you how from the mechanisms of trilateral cooperation we have in the Malacca Strait between Indonesia, Malaysia, and Singapore. And we also have the technical cooperations, and these mechanisms are already in place for several years. And the meetings are done every 2 years to discuss of what type of cooperations we have in place, and if some incidents happen in the Malacca Straits, who should respond to, and when, and what we have to do. And beside the trilateral cooperation in the Malacca Straits, we also have like bilateral cooperations, especially to protect our marine environment. Like we have bilateral, trilateral mechanisms in place. We also have bilateral cooperations in place, and we have also developed some standard operating procedures on how to respond to oil spills when it happens. And in this slide, I can show you that we have standard operating procedures for tank cleaning, standard operating procedure for anchorage, standard operating procedure for vessel inspection, ice enforcement, vessel identification with ice, satellite imagery, and modeling. So these are some of SOPs that we built in Indonesia at the at the national level, but we also have similar SOPs within the trilateral cooperation that for Indonesia and Malaysia and Singapore. So the SOPs are also in place that indicates who should respond to whenever some incident happens. So this is Indonesia, Malaysia, Philippines cooperation, but this focuses on maritime security issues as one of Indonesian contribution to protect all the shipping lines in that area. And this slide shows you the bilateral cooperation that I have between Indonesia and Australia, and also still related to the maritime in environmental responses when it happens. Yeah. Okay. Well, Lollan, I think this is some information that I can share with you as a contribution from Indonesia as a littoral state and as a coastal state, what measures we should do. And starting in July 2020, this year, Indonesia has also already launched as well the TTS in the Sunda and also in the Lombok area. And I think many countries have also responded to this traffic separation scheme in Lombok Strait and also Sunda Strait. And also now in these straits, including in the Malacca Strait and also in the Sunda Strait, we are also open possibilities for the crew change, because Indonesia has already also participated in the UK summit on the 9th of July for the crew change. And Indonesia is now preparing to contribute 5 ports in one in the Malacca Strait, one in the Malacca Strait is based in Batam, and then Sunda Strait is based in Merak Port, and we have another port in Jakarta, which can also serve the crew change, and we also propose another port in Bali and Makassar to serve the archipelagic lanes in the Sunda, in Sulawesi sea line. So these, Lollan, is some of information of the contribution of Indonesia as a coastal state to assist or to help all the ships that passes through our waters and through our straits. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Basilio. I took note that this huge impact of environmental still remain to be solved, and the cooperations among the countries to tackle with these global issues should be needed. And also the additional information that Indonesia is also support the facilitation for the crew change for the global shippings. They already prepared for 5 ports to serve this crew change. We take note of this issue. And thank you, Mr. Basilio. Before we move on to the next speakers, we also want to remind that all the distinguished participants, this is the 3rd day of our seminars. We have 3 days, consecutive days. On the first days, we're talking about the sustainability of shipping industry. And the second day is also we talking about the GHG emissions. And today we discuss about the marine pollutions. So we proceed with the next speakers. We invite Mr. Lucas. Mr. Lucas is the head of marine pollution section in Marine Environmental Divisions of IMO. And I think he will deliver the completion of IMO action plans to address marine plastic litter from ships up to 2025. Mr. Lucas, the time is yours.
Thank you, Lollan. Can I confirm that you can hear me?
Yep.
Okay.
We hear you, and also we can see your share.
Great. I'll just go into presentation mode. And I'll start my timer to make sure that I'm on time. So hello everyone, it's a pleasure to be here. Today I'll be talking about MARPL, Annex 5 and the IMO action plan to address marine plastic litter from ships. In brief, this will be the structure of my presentation. I'll go through very briefly the IMO's mission and structure, a short introduction on the MARPL Convention and its Annex 5. I'll then go into more detail about the IMO action plan to address marine plastic litter. And then I'll close with some other relevant initiatives and a brief discussion on IMO technical assistance and the Glow Litter Partnerships project. The context is that shipping is essential to the world. Over 80% of global trade by volume and more than 70% of its value is carried on board ships. And again, in the context of this presentation, when I refer to the International Maritime Organization, I'll be mostly speaking about the decisions and the commitments that member states make, not what the Secretariat is doing. So the IMO was established in 1948 through the IMO Convention. It's a specialized agency of the United Nations dealing with regulations, requirements, and guidance for international shipping. And today I'll be focusing on prevention and control of marine pollution, specifically marine plastic litter. There are many IMO instruments, conventions such as the SOLAS Convention, which deals with safety of life at sea. But in terms of pollution, the most relevant to today's talk is the MARPL Convention, the International Convention for the Prevention of Pollution by Ships. And these international conventions and agreements then feed down into regional agreements, regional laws, or national legislation when they're implemented and enforced. In terms of sources of pollution from ships, I find this kind of a graphic very useful to remember there are many sources of potential pollution from ships. We'll be focusing on the bottom left corner on garbage that goes into the sea. So MARPL has 6 annexes. We'll be focusing on Annex 5, which deals with garbage from ships. It's been enforced since 1988, with 153 countries being parties to it and covering 99% of world tonnage. The main thing that I'd like to highlight is that there's a general prohibition in MARPL Annex 5 for the discharge of all types of garbage from ships, except in very specific cases, such as when the safety of the ship is in danger, or when bad weather has caused fishing vessels to accidentally lose their fishing gear. It applies to all ships, what we normally refer to as kind of merchant ships, big cargo ships or passenger ships, but also fishing vessels. And from the very beginning of the development of MARPL Annex 5, garbage included plastics and fishing gear. And both plastics and fishing gear generally prohibited from discharge. In terms of implementation and enforcement of MARPL, considering that there's a general prohibition in the convention, it becomes now a question of implementation and enforcement more than anything else, I would say. In terms of that, flag states, the states of which the ship flies the flag of, are responsible for ensuring that ships flying their flag are in compliance. Port states can inspect the ships calling their ports, and they're also responsible for providing adequate port reception facilities for the delivery of ship-generated waste. And coastal states can establish penalties and sanctions for any violations, and they can also establish surveillance programs for the control of illegal discharges, as we heard in the previous presentation. Other aspects of MARPL Annex 5 that are relatively important in this context are the display of placards. I've given some examples on the right of how garbage should be managed. All ships above 100 GT and all passenger ships should have a garbage management plan. Certain ship types above a certain size should have a garbage record book. And the accidental loss or discharge of fishing gear which poses a significant threat to the marine environment or navigation should be reported to the flag state or the coastal state. In terms of reception facilities, I've just included this slide for reference that normal large ports for merchant ships should have port reception facilities. Fishing ports may need additional facilities specific to receiving fishing gear. Now, even notwithstanding the above requirements that are already in place, the member states and parties to MARPOL in MEPC 73 in 2018 wanted to further enhance their commitment to reducing marine plastic litter from ships and adopted the IMO action plan in 2018. The action plan aims to enhance existing policy and the regulatory framework by introducing new supporting measures, and it's divided into 8 sections dealing with reduction of marine plastic litter from fishing vessels, from merchant ships, improving the effectiveness of port reception facilities, enhancing public awareness, education and training, improved understanding of the contribution of ships to the problem, improved understanding of the existing regulatory framework globally, strengthening international cooperation and targeting technical cooperation and capacity building. I'll go through some of the actions that have been completed or are in progress. In terms of reducing marine plastic litter generated from and retrieved by fishing vessels, there's a proposal to MEPC 75 that will meet in November to consider making the marking of fishing gear mandatory in cooperation with FAO. That, in theory, would make reporting more robust because fishing vessels that would lose their fishing gear or would abandon, assuming that they want to break the law, would then report it because if it was found, it would be able to be traced back to the fishing vessel. Preparation of an MEPC circular to collect information from registered fishing vessels regarding any discharges. The PPR subcommittee is working on that. Review the application of placards, garbage management plans, and garbage record keeping to improve their implementation and effectiveness. Again, the PPR subcommittee has been tasked. Consider amending MAR Plan X5 to facilitate enhanced reporting of loss of fishing gear, including reporting to the IMO, and that's in progress. PPR 7 has initiated that work. Preparation of a circular reminding member states to enforce MAR Plan X5 on fishing vessels through port state control measures. The III subcommittee has been tasked with that. And when I refer to these subcommittees, they are the technical bodies of the IMO doing the development of requirements. And encourage port state control MOUs to develop port state control procedures that include fishing vessels. That's related to the action above, and the III subcommittee is dealing with that. In terms of reduction of shipping's contribution to marine plastic litter, large merchant ships, again, a review of the placards, the garbage management plans, and the garbage record keeping being done by the PPR subcommittee. Ways of enhancing the enforcement of MAR Plan X5, including a risk-based approach. That's going to be done by the III subcommittee. And then a more general a subject that has to deal with safety of navigation, but also marine plastic litter when containers lost at sea that are loaded with plastic goods. There's an interest from member states, certain member states and international organizations to bring a proposal to the committees at IMO, to the Marine Environment Protection Committee, to strengthen procedures for reporting such losses and communicating the locations of these lost containers. And for improvement of the effectiveness of port reception facilities, there's a lot of work to be done, but as the very first action, the PPR subcommittee issued a circular reminding member states of their obligations. In terms of improved understanding of the contribution of ships to marine plastic litter, there's introduction of provisions to the convention dealing with the training of fishers to ensure that all fishing vessel personnel have appropriate training. MEPC circular to encourage member states and international organizations to share results of their research, and PPR 7 has completed that. And also there's a provision in the action plan for a study to be conducted on marine plastic litter, including macro and microplastics. Now, that independent study is subject to funding becoming available. We have received contributions to the extent of about $150,000 for the study to commence, but we think there may be a necessity for more funding to carry out the entire scope of the study. But in the meantime, GISAMP, which I'll mention later on, which is a group of experts advising UN bodies, has established a working group on sea-based sources of marine litter, and their first report has been submitted to the Marine Environment Protection Committee at its 75th session in November this year. And at MEPC 73, a couple of years ago, or 74 in fact, the member states developed a regulatory framework matrix which mapped kind of global, regional and national guidance and requirements for reducing plastic entering the marine environment. And that's been available in the document that I've noted down in my presentation that is accessed from the public website of IMO. Now, other initiatives, sorry I've overrun by a couple of minutes, is GISAMP and GPML. As I mentioned before, GISAMP is a joint group of experts on scientific aspects of marine environmental protection. And after this presentation, you can take a look at the slide and access the various sources of information that I've included. The output has been varied and very good, and I would encourage you to take a look and read their reports. Through the GPML, which is a partnership between NGOs, governments, academia, private sector, civil society, and individuals, the London Protocol Office, which is based at the IMO, has produced these two studies. And then to close, just a few words on IMO technical cooperation. $14 million was spent in 2017, and a similar amount of money in 2018 and 2019 to help developing states in implementing and ratifying IMO conventions. For example, in relation to Microplastics 5, there were 4 workshops in 2018 and 2019. And a very exciting and encouraging development recently, the Glow Litter Partnerships project was launched by the Partnerships Department within IMO. It's funded by Norway. $4.5 million have been provided as of yet. And it's a joint project with IMO and FAO. And I encourage you to look at the website. There's recruitment taking place at the moment for a project manager. And this, I believe, will have a tremendous impact on implementation and the completion of the IMO action plan. Thank you very much, and sorry for overrunning.
Thank you, Mr. Lucas, for the information. According to the IMO initiative action plan, that in the various activities like keep monitoring the actions, regulatory, training and human resources, also such a kind of workshop, and also the other studies. Thank you for all the speakers who already present their subjects. And we move forward for the question and answer. We have already here through the question and answer functions. I think this is three questions is raised. I think the first questions from Mr. Sunario. The question is, I think, related to the Professor Bhavani. We know that the plastic has created a lot of harm to our environment, but on the other hand, we also know that the plastic has given us plenty of usefulness. and in many cases, plastic can be recycled. The question is, shall we avoid of using plastic products of all use or use it responsibly? And the second question is to Mr. Basilio from Mr. Sunario as well. Beside the regulation and treaties with our neighboring countries, is there any real action from Indonesian government to encourage the people to care about our environment? Thank you. So, Mr. Basilio, this question is talking about the domestic regulation or domestic policy about the environmental. And also from Mr. Raga Purwanto, the question is raised to Mr. Basilio. What do you suggest to us as Indonesian maritime professional to support the major sports development and to tackle with the problems related to marine pollutions of port and its vicinity? And the last question to Mr. Lucas. How do, from Dini Purnamasari, how do ship owners or masters know that the port reception facilities or companies receiving the garbage from ships are being responsible and that they do not just dump the garbage at sea later? Who controls these service providers? Thank you from Dini. To all the speakers, you can also read this question and answer through the question and answer function. And I think for the first speaker, Mr. Basilio first, maybe you can address the issue.
Thank you very much, Mr. Lollan, for the opportunity to me first, and also to the question raised by Mr. Sunario about the encouragement to the people to take care of the environment. Well, taking the case of the communities living around the Malacca Strait, what we do is, of course, we try to build their awareness. Build awareness is one of the efforts we're doing, and we try to teach them, at least they will become our vigilante. Like they will become our vigilante at the some sea areas. So if they see that some things happen there, they can then report us. And also if there is some oil spill incidents that comes to their areas in the coastal areas, we try to teach them. So first, don't try to touch it, don't try to clean it, because based on the trilateral mechanisms we have, in cleaning the beach, we should do it with the presence of the P&I Club representative in Indonesia, and also with the presence of our port authority. So in this case, if it happens in Malacca Strait, we should involve the port authority, because they are the first responders when the incident happens. And for our touristic groups, like in Bintan area, so we also teach them that we need the pictures, because when it comes to evidences, we should show some, some pictures that happens. So from the pictures that I show you in my presentations, these are taken by the communities and are taken by hotel managers at their areas. So when any incident happens, they will take these pictures and send it to us. Including, for example, we also train the communities how to file a legal suit, because based on the on the law on environment, there is a possibility for individuals even to file a legal suit on environmental issues. And also there are also some avenues for even a class action. So even environmental organizations can also file legal suits against any company that does these activities. So these are some activities we try to propose. Also, we try to support to our communities in that area. And for the next question from Mr. Raga Purwanto regarding the contribution or the support that can be given by the professionals. Well, if we see one of the problems that we face in the Capri Island, sometimes, we see the situation why the oil spills come to the shore and why there is no efforts taken to face the situations when it happens, or to tackle the situations when it happens before it reaches the beaches. So one of the things that we see lacks in our ports, maybe in the Batam area, is the port facility. I think Mr. Lucas can explain you about the requirements of port facilities. I think for the professionals and for Indonesian companies that who wants to start some new business on this issue, I think it is a very big business with economic value. So if you want to invest in reception facilities, then you can talk to our port authorities in Batam area. And we also encourage our provincial governments, because the provincial governments can also have their local owned, state-owned companies. We also encourage them to also find partners to build maybe reception facilities in the Capri Island, so that maybe once we have these reception facilities in the area, maybe we can then avoid these companies trying to dump the oil into the sea if they do it in purpose. Well, Lollan, I think I've answered my questions.
Thank you, Mr. Basilio. And we move forward for Professor Bhavani. The question is how to use the plastic properly.
Thank you very much, and thanks for the question. It's very difficult to answer. We know that plastic can create enormous problems, but plastic also has a place in our lives. We think about all the medical treatments or the medical equipment that uses plastic and how it has helped us live better lives, recover well from operations, things like this. That's from the use of plastics. They're easy to clean. So I don't think we can get rid of it completely until we come up with another material that is less harmful perhaps to the environment, but has the same properties or uses as plastic. And there are currently companies making products that are plastic, similar to plastic, for keeping food fresh, and that's currently underway, but it will take quite some time for that to be scaled up and for it to be used globally. So I think at the minute, I don't think we will ever completely get rid of our use of plastic, but we need to be careful in how we dispose of it and just think on a daily basis. I know when I go shopping now, I'm very careful in what I pick up. My fruits and vegetables, I will actively look for those that are not pre-packaged and that I can just put in my own bag and bring home, rather than those that have already been pre-packaged. It reduces that amount of plastic. And I think this is probably a Western problem than perhaps those I've seen in India and other places where pre-packaged food isn't so high. It's still there, but not as high as it is here, perhaps in the UK. So I think there's a balance, and we can all play our part in making sure that we dispose of our rubbish properly and try and reduce our reliance on our single-use everyday plastic. I think that's answered the question.
Okay, thank you, Professor. And also another question is raised to Mr. Lucas. Mr. Lucas, the question is how IMO keep monitor about the shipping activities related to the marine pollution?
Sorry, Lollan.
Yep.
This was on the question about ship reception, port reception facilities.
Yeah, port reception facilities. Yeah.
Oh, I see.
Yeah.
Yes, indeed, the port reception facilities requirement in MARPL Annex 5 is for provision of adequate port reception facilities to meet the requirements of the ships that are visiting a port. The onshore provision and management and regulations are done at a national level or at a regional level if we think of the European Union, for example. In terms of standards, there are ISO standards for port reception facilities and how they manage waste. But indeed, the ship owner, the master specifically, has so many things to do when visiting a port. I mean, first of all, don't crash the ship, then unload the cargo, manage the garbage, manage the crew. Now with COVID, deal with all those requirements. So it would be rather kind of ironic if the master would be required to know the downstream management of the waste being received by reception facilities. However, there are examples of bigger ship-owning companies that have engaged, that have big corporate responsibility programs where they have engaged with shipping agents where their ships call to make sure that the waste management facilities that are being used by those ships are being managed properly and to the standard that the shipping companies would expect within their corporate social responsibility programs. But that would be very difficult to filter down to smaller ship-owning companies. So it's very important that waste management from ports or at ports receives the same amount of attention at a national level as kind of urban waste management or rural waste management to avoid plastics entering rivers or routes that they could end up in the marine environment. So that's my answer. A bit long-winded, but a tough question. Thank you.
Yep, thank you, Mr. Lucas. Yeah, we realize when we are talking about waste management, it means that we have to have a shared burdens, like Mr. Basilio mentions, that Indonesia also invited so many parties to also tackle with the waste management within the port. Mr. Basilio, we have also two questions raised for you. We still have a time. Maybe we can also address these issues. From Kome Adepoli, he's curious about the marine plastic pollution in Indonesia rather than the oil spill. And also, this is not anonymous. He have a question for Mr. Basilio as well. There are several policies issued by the government to mitigate the commercial vessels to dump waste, especially plastic, to the sea. Is there any specific mechanism the government ensure the compliance of shipping companies and port authorities to properly handle their waste? Mr. Basilio, do you have any opinion about these questions?
Well, I think the question should go to Professor Bhavani.
Yeah.
But anyway,
Okay.
last year, I was invited to talk in Torremolinos, and during the Safe Fishing the Ministerial Conference. It was co-organized by IMO and FAO, and I was invited there to talk about the marine plastic debris. And at that time, I was invited as an IMO expert. So IMO paid me to go to Torremolinos, to FAO, to talk about the marine plastic debris. My message at that time was only one, is that where else will we find our food if even our ocean is already contaminated? I think this is a very strong message to show that in Indonesia, we even found from some 2 or 3 researches that was done by our National University in Makassar, and also our research institute in Jakarta, in collaboration with other international universities, they found out that even in the bellies of fish now, we can find particles of plastics. And even in the table salt, eating salt, yeah? Even in the salt, we can find particles of plastic. So this is actually an alarming situation. So that's why when I appear and as a speaker there, I only pass this message. So we have to really be alerted that even our food is now threatened. Even fish is already threatened, and we have to really be prepared. If one day land cannot provide us with no more food, where else should we find our food? So that was the message. But at least it was just to indicate that the marine plastic issue is a big issue in Indonesia. We listed as the 5th contributors of marine plastic debris by the research. And we try to also collaborate with the World Bank, try to counter the finding of Jambek. But after we do our research with the World Bank at 18 cities, the answer was the same as the finding of Jambek. So just to justify that, although Jambek made just a general, argument, but the theory was right, and at least this shows that the marine plastic debris is a serious issue. But as a coastal state, Indonesia is not dormant. We reacted to this issue very quickly. We have a presidential decree regulation in place, and we even make a very strong commitment that we want to reduce marine plastic debris to 70% by 2025. And now we are working on it. We are encouraging all of our communities to reduce the use of plastic. And even now we already introduced the payback plastics in many of our cities. Well, at least this shows that Indonesia is serious, and we hope that this issue can be eradicated in the future. Lollan?
Yep, thank you, Mr. Basilio. Okay, I think my last question is coming from me to Professor Bhavani. I have a question to ask to you related to the pandemic COVID-19 situation. Despite of the severe situation that we face, in the other side, we found that less economic activities, less transportation activities means that less pollution. Is it the phenomena you can see? Then I think, what is your opinion when we have this kind of situation? Because some of the environmental activists see the more clear sky, more clear environmental, despite of these pandemic situations. I need your opinion about this. Thank you.
Yeah, so we have seen clearer skies, and because there's less travel by people globally. However, we are also seeing on the other side, the downside, or lots of downsides of COVID. I didn't include it in my slides today, but we're all being asked to wear face masks when we go out. Many people are wearing disposable face masks, and we're finding them thrown on the ground, on the beaches. They're being washed into the sea. There are animals living underneath them. There are animals getting entangled in the straps of them, that go over your ears. So that's a real problem. We're all being told to wash our hands more often. And here in the UK, soap often comes in a bottle that has a pump on it, so it's easy for everybody to use, but it's plastic. And because we're having to wash our hands more often, we're getting through the soap more quickly. And so we're using more and more plastic. We're all carrying hand sanitizers. I used to carry it when I traveled abroad, wherever. But now when I go out and after I've been shopping, before I get into my car, everywhere we go, we're using it. That's plastic. And we have to be quite responsible in how we dispose of it, or trying to reuse what we have. Go back to using a bar of soap, not a plastic bottle full of soap. So yeah, the environmental impact in terms of cleaner air, has been great for the planet, but we are increasing our use of plastics in other ways, and we need to, I'm not saying that we shouldn't be using masks, we definitely should be, but look for reusable ones, cloth ones that you can take off and wash and reuse, things like that. We really need to be very careful in how we take this forward. But yeah, there are flip sides on both. There are positives and negatives to this.
Thank you, Professor Bhavani, for the overview. I think this is the end of the question and answer, and almost the end of our discussions. Before we end up these seminars, we would like to invite the Charge of the Affair of Embassy, Indonesian Embassy in London, Mr. Adam Mulawarmantugio, to give closing remarks. Pak Adam, silakan.
Very much, Pak. Hello. Can you hear me, Pak Lollan? Well, thank you very much, Pak Lollan, for for inviting me to give my remarks, closing remarks. And I follow interesting discussions on the last 3 days on this topic. And I would like, on behalf of the Indonesian Embassy, I would like to express my sincere thanks to all speakers who have shared their insight on our topic, not only for 2 days, but on the last 3 days. Marine pollution is not only harmful for the environment, but also pose a danger to shipping. And I think all panelists already underscores this issue. And it is the objective of the seminar to continue raising awareness and spotlight on this aspect. And I believe all participants agree with me that all panelists have done exactly that, mapping out the challenges we are facing and what needs to be done in addressing these challenges. I would like in this regard to express our profound appreciations to Professor Elisa Morgera and One Ocean Hub, University of Strathclyde, for the excellent collaborations with the Embassy in co-hosting this 3 days seminar series. And the seminars are organized also to celebrate IMO's Maritime Week and the World Maritime Day that we are going to celebrate tomorrow on the 24th September. In the last 3 days, I recognize that we had a very interesting discussions involving different stakeholders on the important issues of sustainable shipping. This issue was addressed on the first days of the seminar. As we are now in the last decade, we are trying to overcome and trying to meet the ambitions to deliver the sustainable development goals by 2030. It is urgent certainly to enhance the effort for sustainable shipping to successfully meet the goals. And on the second days, the seminar discussed the oceans and climate change. This is also an important topic, especially in the UK, as the UK is preparing to host the upcoming COP26 next year. We took note of several issues raised during the discussions and underlined the need to move forward in the discussions on the GHG emissions. We cannot overemphasize the importance of shipping as it is moving peoples, and the fact that 80% of all goods traded on the global scales are using shipping. It is therefore important that we identify ways for different stakeholders could do to improve the sustainability of the shipping sectors, from regulatory framework by governments, normed by the international organizations such as the IMO, and also bringing awareness by shipping industries to innovations by academia. In this context, the seminars, I believe, contribute to provide a good opportunity to exchange views on how the shipping industry could contribute to reduce its adverse environment impact and support the objective of sustainable development. We certainly appreciate the works that the IMO, its member state, and other stakeholders are doing in this effect, to this effect. And we express our readiness to continue working together to meet this objective. Finally, I would also like to thank all participants who have taken their time to attend the seminar series on day 1, day 2, and today. Your active participation has enabled us to have lively and thoughtful discussions. We believe we should not stop these seminars today. We will continue to have discussions on various aspects, which already underlined by various panelists on the day 1, day 2, and day 3. And I think on the plastic management, it is also important to highlight the important contribution and the roles of port waste management, because this is also very important. Pak Basilio already underscores the importance of the oceans to provide food for not only for today but also for generations to come. And I think Professor Bhavani also underscores the importance of changing the mindset while we having continue to have plastic, because this is some things that for the time being we couldn't avoid to use plastic material for daily use. And I think since mankind is very innovative, I think in the next decade, in next generations, they may come up with another new innovations in trying to replicate or to change plastic into more friendly environment materials to be used. So with that, I conclude my remarks, and once again, I would like to express our appreciations to our co-hosts, the speakers, and all the participants who have made the seminar a possibility. I pass the floors back to Pak Lollan. Once again, thank you very much. I'm afraid the moderator is freezing. Pak Ando, probably you could help.
Yes, of course, Pak. It seems that Pak Lollan's screen has frozen. So I would just, I think we have reached the end of our discussion today. So in the absence of Pak Lollan, thank you again, everyone, for participating in our 3-day seminar. Thank you also to One Ocean Hub. And with that, have a good day to everyone. So goodbye. Yeah, Pak Lollan is back now.
Pak Lollan is back on the screen now. Before we close, can we take pictures of all participants? Yeah. Pak Lollan, may I invite, suggest all participants to.
Yeah, all the participants, please. Senia,
to turn on the camera.
Okay. All right. Take 1, 2, 3. All right. All right. Thank you. And once again, thank you for all speakers, Mr. Basilio, Prof. Bhavani, and Mr. Lucas, and particularly for all distinguished participants. This is part of our contributions and also our participations of the IMO World Maritime Day, Sustainable Shipping for Sustainable Planet. And with this seminar is concluded. Thank you.
Thank you. Happy Maritime Day for all of us.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye. Thank you. Bye-bye.